Welcome to the Deep Dive. We're here to cut through the noise and get straight to the essential insights on topics really shaping our world. Today, we're diving into something absolutely fundamental for any organization aiming for excellence. That's ISO 9001, the global standard for quality management. And specifically, we're looking at the big update coming in 2026. In a world that just won't sit still, organizations need more than just good processes these days. They need systems that can adapt, systems that can innovate, really thrive amidst all this constant change. So our mission for this deep dive is to unpack the core changes in ISO 9001.2026. We want to understand why these shifts are happening right now, and of course explore what it actually means for you and your organization, especially building on what we know from the 2015 version. Okay, let's get into it, because this isn't just a minor technical tweak. It feels much more like a strategic evolution really designed for what's coming next. So maybe the place to start is that fundamental question: why?
Why is the International Organization for Standardization, ISO, tackling such a significant update for a standard like 9001? Especially, just over a decade since the last major one. What's really pushing this change now?
Well, the main driver really is just the incredible speed of change we're seeing in the global business environment. The world is profoundly different than it was back in 2015. I mean, think about it. We've had this massive acceleration in digitalization. There's a much, much clearer, undeniable need now for environmental sustainability. And we're also facing these increasingly complex, sort of interconnected global risks that maybe weren't quite as front and center, or perhaps weren't even fully anticipated a decade ago. We're definitely living and working in what people call a VUCA world, right? Volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. And that framework, it highlights a really critical shift. Quality isn't just about internal operational efficiency anymore. It can't be. It now inherently needs to bring in these broader social and environmental contributions, these responsibilities. So this 2026 update, it's really a direct strategic answer to that new reality. It's weaving things like organizational resilience, the very real impacts of climate change, and leveraging technological advancements right into the core of what quality management means today.
Right, so it sounds like this standard isn't just playing catch-up. It's actively trying to sort of anticipate what's coming down the line. But how fast is this future actually arriving? I mean, is this something organizations need to brace for overnight, or is there a bit of a runway here?
That's a really crucial point. The development process itself tells us quite a bit. It kicked off back in 2023. It's being handled by ISO's Technical Committee 176, Subcommittee 2, that's TC 176SC2. And given how complex this is, they're following a pretty rigorous 36-month development cycle. So it takes time. We're expecting the draft international standard, the DIS, to be out for review around, say, May or June of 2025, with the final publication then scheduled for September 2026. And here's the important part, the good news, really. There's going to be a pretty generous 3-year transition period. So that gives organizations plenty of time, basically until 2029, to fully own their systems and get aligned with the new standard.
Okay, 2029. That does provide some breathing room. So with that timeline in mind, let's maybe lift the hood a bit and see what's actually being built into this new standard. Are we talking a total rewrite, a completely new rule book? Or is it more like a strategic refinement of the foundation we already have?
It's definitely more on the side of strategic refinement, yeah. But it's refinement with some pretty significant implications. The changes are mostly focused on tweaking existing requirements and, crucially, aligning the standard much better with ISO's harmonized structure, the HS. Now, that alignment piece, that's actually a really big deal, practically, because it makes integration with other key management system standards like ISO 14001 for environment or ISO 4501 for health and safety much, much easier. It creates a more cohesive framework, less fragmented for organizations that are trying to manage multiple certifications.
Yeah, that structural alignment, that sounds like a huge practical win. Streamlining things. Okay, so let's maybe zoom in on some of the core areas where these refinements are really hitting home. Section 5, for instance, ethical leadership and culture of quality. Just the title itself suggests something, well, deeper than just ticking boxes on a process checklist. What does ethical leadership really mean in this context? How does it affect quality beyond just, say, compliance?
Yeah, this is, I think, a really profound and positive shift. It really elevates the role of top management. It's about them actively fostering a genuinely ethical and quality-driven culture right through the whole organization. But it's not just about saying the right things, It means actively promoting ethical behaviors, really encouraging diversity, ensuring inclusion at every single level. A subtle but significant way companies can fall short, even with good intentions, is seeing ethics as sort of a separate compliance thing over there.
Right, like it's HR's problem, not quality's.
Exactly, instead of seeing it as integral to quality.
Yeah.
And the cost of that oversight, well, it can be huge. Think about a single ethical lapse, maybe somewhere in the supply chain. It doesn't just potentially compromise product quality. It can completely erode brand reputation, destroy customer trust, trust that might have taken years of quality efforts to build. So the quality policy itself, under this new standard, will need to clearly reflect these ethical commitments. It needs to move beyond purely operational stuff. It's about genuinely strengthening the organization's reputation and building that trust with everyone involved, customers, employees, suppliers, the lot. Building quality on a foundation of integrity, really.
That's such a critical connection, linking ethics directly to how robust your quality actually is. Okay, so if ethical leadership sets that cultural stage, then the next big piece must be how organizations navigate all the turbulence, the risks in this VUCA world we talked about. How does ISO 9701.2026 expand the view on risk management and resilience? That's in Section 6, right?
Yes, Section 6. And the new layer here, it significantly broadens that risk-based thinking. It now explicitly includes organizational resilience. So this means organizations aren't just thinking about, individual process failures. They need to be actively preparing for wider, more systemic disruptions. We're talking about the whole spectrum from global pandemics, like we've seen, geopolitical instability, right through to those increasingly sophisticated cyber attacks. And what's really fascinating and critical is the official inclusion of climate change as a significant external risk factor. Organizations will now actually be required to evaluate its potential impact on their processes, on their supply chains, resource availability, their overall operations. It becomes a central piece of their risk assessment.
Wow. Okay, so the standard isn't just saying, hey, be aware of climate change. It's actually mandating that organizations evaluate its direct impact on their quality system. Can you maybe give us a quick example, like an organization that might have overlooked this before and how the new standard forces their hand?
Sure, absolutely. Let's imagine, say, a manufacturing company. They source key raw materials from a region that's becoming increasingly prone to extreme weather, floods, droughts, whatever. Now, under the 2015 standard, their risk assessment might have focused mostly on supplier reliability, maybe material specs, that sort of thing. But the 2026 standard, it compels them to explicitly consider how rising sea levels or increased droughts or more frequent intense storms could directly impact their suppliers' ability to operate, or how it could disrupt transportation routes, or even affect the quality and the sheer availability of those raw materials they need. It forces a much more proactive, long-term view of supply chain resilience, directly linking these climate factors to the quality of their end product.
That really brings it home. Okay, so climate change isn't just one risk factor in one section. You mentioned it's woven throughout.
Exactly. It's transversal. That's the term being used. It permeates the whole standard, not just stuck in one clause. And this explicitly aligns ISO 9001.2026 with the broader ESG criteria, environmental, social, and governance, that are becoming so important. So organizations will need to assess how climate change affects not just their operations, but also all their interested parties, their stakeholders. And they need to actively foster sustainable practices right across the board. This can mean anything from evaluating energy use and waste to making more conscious choices about the materials they use, the supply chain partners they work with. It's designed to be a systemic approach, embedding sustainability right into the fabric of quality management.
That feels incredibly necessary right now. And just as necessary, probably, is this focus on digital transformation. Everyone's talking about it. What kind of technological integration are we actually seeing in Section 7 and 8? And what does it mean for a company that maybe isn't, at the absolute cutting edge of AI yet?
Right. So this update puts a really explicit focus on leveraging modern tech to optimize processes. We're talking about integrating and using tools like artificial intelligence, AI, big data analytics, automation, things like that. But the real insight here, I think, isn't just go use AI. It's understanding that ISO 9001 is now explicitly challenging organizations to see their data as a quality asset.
Data as a quality asset.
Oh, yeah, meaning its accuracy, its security, how ethically it's used. These things become as critical as the physical materials you manage in a factory. This shift makes robust data management and governance a core quality requirement. So for maybe a mid-sized manufacturing firm, it might not mean they have to go build some super complex AI system overnight. Not at all. It could be about more effectively using sensor data they already have from their production line to, say, predict equipment failures before they happen, or using data analytics to optimize how they use materials and cut down on defects. It's really about enabling evidence-based decisions, moving away from just intuition towards data-driven insights, and that in turn drives huge gains in operational efficiency and opens doors for innovation. It's about smart quality management, really, whatever your current digital maturity level happens to be.
Got it. So embedding a kind of digital quality mindset, not just deploying the shiniest new tech. Okay. And finally, let's touch on Section 10, proactive continuous improvement. Continuous improvement that's always been the bedrock of any QMS, right? How is this section getting a refresh? And what does proactive really mean here in practice?
Yeah, this section's been thoughtfully reorganized, I think, to reflect a more forward-looking stance. Continuous improvement is now clearly labeled 10.1, and then nonconformity and corrective action sits under 10.2. The shift, it might seem subtle, but it's powerful. It's moving from just fixing what broke towards proactively creating new value. It's about embedding a culture where innovation isn't some separate side project, but it's the default way you improve quality. This means using lessons learned not just to stop something bad happening again, but to actually spark the next improvement. To look for opportunities to enhance processes, products, services before problems even crop up. It really encourages foresight, creativity, strategic advancement, rather than just reacting after the fact.
Okay, that paints a really clear picture of these enhancements across the board. When you put it all together, what do you see as the starkest contrasts? Comparing this upcoming ISO 901.2026 to the 2015 version we're familiar with.
Well, if we connect the dots, the contrasts really highlight that strategic evolution we talked about. Take the risk focus. In 2015, it was, well, pretty general. But 2026 explicitly brings in organizational resilience and the real impacts of climate change. That's a big difference. Then sustainability. Barely mentioned in 2015, really. Now, 2026 mandates explicit ESG integration woven right through.
Right.
Digitalization wasn't explicitly called out in 2015. Now, there's a clear emphasis on leveraging AI, big data, smart quality management in 2026, and organizational culture. It's moved from a fairly basic leadership focus to a much deeper, ethical, and culturally driven approach in the new version. It's genuinely a much more holistic, integrated, and definitely more forward-thinking view of what quality means.
Okay. For organizations listening in, these changes definitely sound significant. But as you said, the 3-year transition period gives some runway. What are the practical, tangible steps people need to start thinking about now to get ready for this shift?
Yeah, to navigate this well, organizations really need to take several concrete steps. First off, conduct thorough internal audits. Map their current quality management system against these new requirements to see where the gaps are. That's step one. Then, comprehensive staff training is vital. Everyone needs to understand the updates and what they mean for their roles. And critically, updating existing documentation, quality manuals, procedures, work instructions. All that needs reviewing and revising. It's also really important to consider those sector-specific needs. The automotive industry, for example. They'll need to align these ISO 9001 changes with their specific standard, IATF 16949. That requires extra specific adjustments unique to their sector.
So audits, training, documentation, and sector specifics. Makes sense. But beyond just ticking the compliance box, what's the real upside for organizations that jump on this early? Is it just about being ahead, or are there deeper benefits?
Oh, there are definite, tangible competitive advantages to being an early adopter here. Absolutely. Organizations that embrace these changes proactively, they often see enhanced operational efficiency pretty quickly. That leads to real cost savings, more streamlined processes. They can also achieve genuinely improved customer satisfaction because their quality systems become more robust, more ethical, and just more responsive to what customers expect today. And ultimately, all that leads to a stronger position in the market. They're seen as leaders not just in product quality, but also in ethical practices, in sustainability, in organizational resilience. And those factors are increasingly important differentiators for customers, for investors, and even for attracting top talent.
Right, those are compelling benefits. But let's be realistic. Every big change like this comes with hurdles. What are the main challenges organizations should probably anticipate on this journey? And maybe some thoughts on how they might tackle them.
That's a really important point, and yes, there are definitely challenges. First, you often encounter resistance to change. This can be especially true for small and medium-sized enterprises, SMEs. They might struggle a bit with integrating newer aspects like sustainability, perhaps due to the initial investment costs, or maybe a feeling they lack the technical expertise in these areas. It can feel a bit daunting.
Yeah, I can see that.
Then there's the technical complexity. That emphasis on digitalization, AI, big data, It does demand investment, both in technology and in upskilling people. That can be a real barrier for companies that aren't already far down the digital road. Thirdly, for multinational companies, global alignment can get tricky. Trying to harmonize these new ISO requirements with all the different local regulations, think EU, Green Pact, specific national environmental laws, that adds another layer of complexity. And finally, measurement of impact. This one's tough. How do you quantify the ROI, the return on investment, for improvements in ethical culture or for boosting organizational resilience? It often requires more advanced metrics that aren't always standardized or easy to track immediately, making it harder sometimes to justify those initial costs.
Those are significant hurdles. So what's the advice for navigating them?
Well, to overcome these, we usually recommend a few key things. Actively involve certified ISO experts, bring in people who really understand the standard and the transition process. Also, participate in ISO forums or industry groups. Stay informed, share best practices, learn from others, and crucially, develop a really well-structured phased transition plan. Break it down, account for these complexities, allow for incremental steps. That makes it feel much more manageable.
Break it down. Good advice for any big project, right? Well, this has been an incredibly insightful deep dive. It's really clear that ISO 9001.2026 isn't just another update on the shelf. It's really a strategic evolution, pushing towards a more holistic, more resilient, and definitely a more future-proof kind of quality management system. And critically, as you've highlighted, it's aligning with these huge global challenges, climate change, digitalization that we're all grappling with.
Exactly. And effective adoption, it's really going to hinge on a few key things. Committed leadership right from the top, diligent, phased planning throughout the organization, and a well-managed transition process that makes full use of that generous 3-year window we have until 2029. It really comes down to foresight and taking strategic action now. It's about making quality management a truly proactive force for organizational success in this changing world.
Yeah, it really paints this picture of quality management shifting from maybe a necessary compliance function to an absolutely essential strategic tool for the future of any business. It's about building that solid foundation that can genuinely withstand and maybe even thrive amidst all this unprecedented change we're seeing. So as you, our listener, reflect on all this, considering how rapidly the world is changing, what overlooked external risk do you think organizations might need to start preparing for? Something perhaps even beyond what ISO 9001.2026 explicitly calls out yet. What's that next big challenge just over the horizon? Something to think about. We'll see you next time for another deep dive.